Good evening and welcome to the United for Fergie podcast on Talk of the Devils, the leading Manchester United independent Manchester United. I did this last time. I should have said independent first. Independent Manchester United podcast. If you're watching this live on YouTube or Facebook, hello, and leave a comment, get involved, like, subscribe, etc., etc. If you're listening to this on the audio podcast on whatever platform you're on, please also subscribe, leave your comments, give reviews, all that good stuff that helps the channel. So, before I get into it, and before we talk about tonight's topic, there's a couple of other points I wanted to bring up before we deep dive into tonight's topic. So, there's been a little bit happened in amongst United legends over the past week or so, and I just want to acknowledge those before we start. So, happy 77th birthday to Jimmy Greenough today. 77 being a very appropriate number.
Class.
Yes.
Class.
And I'm almost positive that we'll be doing a Jimmy Greenough podcast at some point in the future.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say congratulations to Willie Morgan, MBE, who's been honoured for his charitable work. Absolutely fantastic news. Well done to Willie. And I don't think we can really move any further without acknowledging the sad passing of Gordon McQueen a few days ago. Very, very sad news. Condolences from myself and I'm sure everyone else here to Haley and his family.
Absolutely.
What a player! And according to many of his peers, one of the funniest men in the dressing room, one of the funniest men in football. So many condolences. He'll be much missed, I'm sure, but we'll be keeping his memory alive. And I'm sure again we might touch on a podcast about Gordon at some point in the future. So I just wanted to get those acknowledged first. Right. So the 21st of March, 1984. So we're going back 39 years, chaps. 39 years, right?
Wow.
Yet the memories are still as fresh now as they were then. So we get beat away at Barcelona, 2-0. It's a bit of an uphill struggle. But we're going to go back a little bit further before we get to the main event. So, Pete, I'm going to direct this to you and actually all of you chaps, really. Sorry, I forgot to say hello. Evening, Mike. Evening, Pete, and evening, Paddy.
Evening, Paul.
Thank you for coming on and
evening,
welcome
folks.
to the podcast.
Brilliant.
Welcome back to the podcast,
Brilliant.
Mike. Thanks for being on, Paddy, and to you as well,
No problem
Pete.
at all.
So, the European Cup Winners' Cup 1984-1985. Pete, this is probably right up your street, obviously. United start with Dukla Prague and go through on away goals after 3-3. Did you attend the home and aways, or did you do the homes for these ones?
The homes for that one. I remember. I think Wilkins scored late on. I've got a feeling he did. No, I didn't go to the away one. But yeah, it's a tricky time. That really. I mean, the Cup Winners' Cup sometimes, in those days, especially of course it's gone now. It merged with the Europa League, but you could get some difficult clubs, especially from the Eastern Europe. And Dukla Prague was certainly that. There were no mugs. They put on a good display against United, and it was hard fought over the two legs.
Yeah, I think it was an 89th minute equaliser for Ray Wilkins in the second leg. I think that managed to get United's third goal, the equaliser, and then took them through on away goals.
Yeah, that rings a bell. No, it's very tense. And it was up at the scoreboard end, I seem to remember. So we got through. We just made it through. You know, we thought we'd sail through, but no, it was tough.
In the next round, United were drawn against Spartak Varna, in which United cruised to 4-1.
Yeah,
overall. That's another name you don't hear very often. Spartak Varna.
Absolutely.
Do you know what? I was looking through some of the teams that were in the European Cup Winners' Cup that year, and I don't think most of them exist anymore, let alone pronounce them. But a lot of them just don't exist anymore. And then we get to the quarter final, away in Barcelona for the first leg, and United lose 2-0. What are we thinking from there? Is this kind of this is uphill, guys, or was there some hope that even though we're 2-0 down away at a good Barcelona side, whether we had a team that could pull that around and pull us through? What were thoughts at those times, Jack?
I think the performance in Barcelona was a lot better than the scoreline suggested. I think Robbo hit the bar, had a chance to hit the bar, and you look at their 2 goals, a screaming own goal by Graham Hogg, and a cracking volley from outside the box a minute or 2 from the end. 2-0 flattered them, really. But then again, you're 2-0 behind. And you've got Maradona and you've got Schuster playing for them. Yeah. It's you dream of pulling it back, but I think a lot of people went into the game to watch with hope rather than expectation.
Mm-hmm.
I think, but like you said, that I remember. Look, I'm 58 now, but I still remember that game. But you go into the new cup, mate. Schuster, Maradona, you're up against it, aren't you? And then it's 2-0 down. But that's about European nights coming in. Hope. That again, you talk about that, Mike, about hope, and didn't it happen though? Hope became reality. So with Graham Hogg, what a great centre half, still is.
I couldn't get to the away leg for that one. I had the first one. Although my mate went, he travelled independently, and but because of the trouble that had been in Valencia the season before, United didn't ask for any tickets for their away fans, and they didn't. There was no official club tour went, and in fact, Atkinson in the programme made an appeal the week before. Would fans not travel? Sorry, about a month before. Would fans not travel to Barcelona? So those that went did go independently, and it was because it turned very violent in Valencia in September '82. There was some anti-British feeling because of what happened with the Falkland War that had just happened that year, and the Spanish fans turned on United supporters, and the Spanish police, should we say, turned a blind eye, if not joined in. So. We've got to remember this was the early 80s, moving up to Heysel and some of the worst hooliganism we've seen in this country or abroad. So United were very cautious. They said, we don't want to be thrown out of this competition in any way. And they've been threatened with that after the Valencia incident, even though a lot of the United fans were innocent, didn't cause any trouble. So they didn't have a big following away, Paul. And as Mike said, we played well. Ron Atkinson, I think, thought we should have got a draw, let alone end up 2-0 down. But it was a Graham Hogg own goal, wasn't it? It was unfortunate. And then a 90th minute, belter. So a no away goal, which counted in those days. So I think really, I think we travelled in hope rather than expectations for the home leg.
That was going to be my next point, actually, is had that week, there was obviously a week between each game, was there a sense of anticipation, or was it let's just go and enjoy the occasion because it's Barcelona?
Well, we stuffed Arsenal, didn't we, at the weekend before the home leg? As we talked about the Robbo podcast, they went top of the league and were, playing the best football that I'd seen since my first game in '79. So there was a bit of a momentum building with the fans thinking we could win the league this year, and we all thought we were going to because Liverpool was stuttering, we were knocking teams aside. So we went, beat Arsenal 4-0. Liverpool lost at the weekend as well, so we're top of the league, we're playing brilliant, everyone's on fire. So the momentum was with us going into the game rather than a few dodgy results and then playing against Maradona. I think if we'd have been stuttering in the league, it might be a different story.
But didn't Paddy Craren say, though, Pete, that you can't beat just before the game, that you can't beat these European nights? I don't know whether that was a bit of a push for the players to think, European nights, and then it went from there. But I thought Paddy Craren's comments before the game may have had a bearing on it. May not do. I think it possibly may have done.
I think there was talk of, look, if the crowd gets behind us, because of course this was '84. Most people that were at the game remembered a couple of important games in the European games in the 70s. There weren't that many, but we played Juventus and Ajax, and then quite a few remembered the 68 and 69 European Cup semi-finals and the games against Madrid and Milan at home. So they knew that it, just like now, if you can get that crowd, not just on your side, because at Old Trafford they're always on United's side, but if you can get it at its best, you know, when it's just a sea of red humanity screaming behind United, and I think it did kind of start off that way. But going into the game, Paul, the question again, Mike spot on. We'd beaten Arsenal on the Saturday to overtake Liverpool with 10 games to go. Ron Atkinson only had one objective, was to make United champions of England again for the first time since '67. So it looked like he was going to do that. They were playing great football, and I think in that run to get to the top, we were undefeated for about 16 sticks in my memory, 16 league games from before Christmas. We went out to Bournemouth in the Cup and Oxford in the League Cup, I think. So we hadn't done well in those Cups. But in the league, I think we'd only lost 4 games up to that time we played Barcelona. So I think United were on a high, and the quality of the football was pure Manchester United style, entertaining, expansive, exciting, and winning. So I think we were optimistic, but we knew we were up against Europe's most experienced side at the time then.
I think, Pete, wasn't it? Brian Robson, sorry, Paul. Brian Robson getting injured, though. But Brian Robson getting injured, I remember at the time we were going flying, weren't we, before that? And it was Brian Robson's injury that stopped it, wasn't it? And we didn't have that squad depth. Liverpool always had that. They knew what they were doing. They could go, you could go top 4, I don't know, 6 months, and they'd still pip you to the post, wouldn't they? They had that winning mentality and got hated Liverpool. And that's so many people support Liverpool now. They've come up now because they were brilliant then in the 80s. So I hated Liverpool. There's no tomato still there now, to be fair. But they always had it, didn't they? Liverpool had that ingredient, but like we had when we won all our premierships. They had that ingredient of winning. We're going to win it anyway because we knew what we were doing. Doesn't matter. Sooner to knock it across there, exactly. So it was Robson's injury and us not having that squad depth and having the lack of experience of winning. We needed to win that first one. It was a mountain. So that was my comment on that. What you just said, Pete. Yeah.
No, you're spot on, Paddy. Liverpool had the recipe. They had the recipe for Coca-Cola. We were still trying to find, we were making a nice fizzy drink, but we failed at the end. But we don't want to preempt the greatness of what we're going to talk about with the match itself.
No.
It probably was as good as it got that season because, as you say, Robson got injured, and we weren't a one-man team, but it psychologically, United were more vulnerable when Robson wasn't in the starting 11.
That's right.
Also, guys, how typical United to have limped out of the FA Cup away at Bournemouth, and then to do what they did against Barcelona.
Well, it's typical.
And what, 2 months later? That's just so typical United, right?
Well, it's typical United under Atkinson, especially. Because every time we played Liverpool, I thought we were going to win. Played Notts County away or home, it was always like, and end up, scrapping a draw or losing. So the big games, I was never afraid of as a United fan. It was the bread and butter games that seemed to lose us the league every year.
He was swashbuckling, wasn't he? I mean, not as good as Doherty, who I loved deeply, but I think on he's up here because I'm from the Midlands up here. His football's fantastic, but they were so porous and they were going to lose. I think Ron always had that brilliant teams, brilliant play, fantastic players, but there was always that element with Ron Atkinson in his teams, especially United as well, and other teams he's gone on to. They just didn't have it, that next bit, it was missing.
And if you look at time after his at United, he was good in the cup still, but he couldn't win the league. So he didn't do it with Villa when Fergie won his first title. So some managers are good managers for the cup, but can't sustain it through 42 games as it was then, 38 now. And you've got to compete in the cups and the Europe as well. So, But Atkinson certainly lived the United lifestyle in terms of that daring do that Busby had created. I don't think that Matt Busby had a sunbed in his office, but he certainly created that at the end of each week you've got to entertain those people that have passed to go to work in Trafford Park or Salford or Collyhurst or whatever. He had a duty to entertain them, Busby said, at the end of the week. And Docherty got that, Atkinson got that. Sadly, O'Farrell and Sexton didn't, unfortunately. Fergie got it in the end.
So, 21st of March, 1984, United are at home to Barcelona in the second leg, 2-0 down. These are the teams. So for United was Gary Bailey in goal. You had Graham Hogg, Kevin Moran, Arthur Albiston and Mike Duxbury. Remy Moses, skipper. Ray Wilkins, Arnold Muren, Big Norman and Frank Stapleton up top. Barcelona's team was Urruti, the famous Urruti, as we found out during the commentary. Alex Zanco, Moratala, Alberto Miranda, Alonso, Munoz, Maradona, certain Diego, Bernd Schuster, Marcos Alonso, not that one, and Rojo up front, not Marcus, but another Rocco. So when Pete, you were there, Mike, you were there, right?
Yeah.
At those nights, okay. When you saw the team sheets, did you think, yeah, we can take these. We can take these. If we can get an early goal, we'll be able to take these boys on and give as good as they get. Did you expect when you took your seats, wherever you were in the ground, of what was about to unfold? Was it any expectations, or were you just going to enjoy the occasion because you saw Maradona and company play?
I think it was a bit of the latter, because I travelled up, as I explained before. My dad ran the North Devon Supporters Club, so we caught the bus at lunchtime from North Devon. So we had the long 5-hour drive in the afternoon, sort of building the expectation, the nerves. Just, we get to Birmingham and you get nervous. You get turned off the M6 and the nerves will start to build, which was different because when I was going to every home game, and it was not run of the mill, but that's what you did. You just you got on the bus 7:30 on a Saturday and you go to Old Trafford to watch a game, go home. This felt different. The excitement, the nerves. It was a night game. It was Barcelona. It was Maradona. It just felt different for the whole day, even a few days leading up. So there was a bit of more nerves and more tension. I didn't really believe until I got into the ground, and just the noise, even before the game, was totally different from anything I'd experienced before that point.
Did it feel, though, Mike, that this is what Man United is all about? These big European nights, the playing, testing ourselves against the elite teams in Europe to see if we really are where we as fans we want them to be. Was there that feel about it?
I think that one day just was like a crescendo of what had been building for 2 or 3 years before. Winning the Cup in '83, the momentum in the league, as I alluded to earlier. It was also almost a sense of no one could foresee what was going to happen that night and what would subsequently become a thing of legend. But there was an expectation in the ground that something special might happen.
Pete, was it the same for you?
Very much so. I didn't have to travel as far as Mike. I got on the number 58 bus and went about 4 miles down the road. But I was just as excited. And I never go to Old Trafford just thinking I'll turn up to see what happens. And I hope I always go thinking United will win. Or always. Not expecting to, but thinking we will, because we've been blessed with great players down the years. But you touched on the European nights. It is a thing with United. It always has been. It is now. The league's good. Domestically, that's good. That's important. But the European Cup itself is something United fell in love with right at the start in '56. And United, the club did. United, the fans did before all our times. And even when we were playing games at Main Road, when when we didn't have floodlights at Old Trafford in '56 and '57, etc., the ground was full. The ground was full in those days, particularly for European nights. And there had been talk, so we knew our history, not just know your history, but I think when United fans, even when they're there today, you've got that feeling of history around you. It's in the walls, it's in the stands, and it's in the seats. But as Mike said, there was a kind of expectation that this is something different. And just on a small point, but to get a flavour of the evening where it's different from now. And I'm not an older guy who thinks things were great then and not great now. There's greatness now, there's rubbish now, there's greatness then, and there was some poor play then. But we didn't go to our seats, Paul. I'm being pedantic, Pete, now. We went and stood on the Stretford end or the United Road or the scoreboard paddock or the Stretford paddock. And that brings a different atmosphere. Old Trafford's loud today, but when it really got going, when you had this massive 12,000 stood up on the Stretford end and they'd only feet from the pitch, you could suck the ball in on some big nights. It was something special to play in front of, as I suppose was the Kop and certain other big grounds. So that all comes out on the night, doesn't it, Mike? At the start, you feel, this our heritage is that we go for it now, and I think as far as the fans were concerned, it was loud right from the start. I don't think it stopped all game.
Yeah, and also there's 58,000 in the ground, and about 57,800 were United fans, which you very rarely got the whole of the ground as your support. Even the small clubs like Southampton would bring 2,000 or 3,000, but there'd be a small pen for them, segregation either side. So there's always that gap between that was missing. That night, it was just everyone was packed in, and they were United fans with the same, going for the same cause and same passion.
Yeah, we were of course respectful and aware of, because that Maradona was playing there. Now 2 years later, he'd win the World Cup almost single-handedly with Argentina in a way Messi did at the back end of last year. But of course, we didn't know he was going to do that back then. But he was a real rising star, and Barcelona just bought him. He knew he was a great player. And then they had a German international called Bernd Schuster, who was a really classy player.
Got lovely hair, Petey had. Yeah. Remember that?
Yeah, lovely hair, like mine, only golden. So they had two international stars, which you didn't have a lot of in those days. The players still mainly played in their own country, and the Spanish players were very good. I think the Alonso one you mentioned was the grandfather of the Marco Alonso that played in the UK until recently. So they had some very, very good players, and they had these two guys that we were wary of, I guess, Mike, and also the manager was Cesar. Not Ancelotti, who am I thinking of?
Cesar Menotti.
Sorry?
Menotti.
Yes, Menotti. Yeah,
he won the World Cup with Argentina
to the '78 World Cup final. So we knew what the pedigree was. We relied on raw passion, and hopefully the players turned it on.
So some of the comments I've been given on, and I always ask this when we do every podcast, and I say, look, if you were there, give us your thoughts and your comments. And I just want to share some of those across both Facebook and Twitter from various different people. So Darren said, and this is all on Facebook, he was 13, went to the game. The following day at school, I swear half my classmates who went still had those cheers ringing in their ears. Absolute bedlam that night. Nearly 40 years later, nothing has topped that atmosphere. And of course, we've got to talk about that atmosphere, and we'll get to that. David Platt, who's been on the podcast previously, they arrived hours early outside the stadium, desperate for a ticket. Even at that time, 35 quid is what touts were asking for tickets. We all knew, unable to articulate why, this was going to be a really special night, how right we were. Strangely enough, outside for the Juventus semi-finals, the touts were struggling to give tickets away. He also said the greatest atmosphere experienced at any English stadium, 90 plus minutes and 360, I'm not quite sure what that is, degrees or minutes or seconds of utter mayhem. Charles Pulis was there from Malta. It was the best ever performance he watched in European matches. Robbo, Captain Magnificent, or Captain Fantastic, was magnificent. Michael Reardon, never heard anything like it before or since. An atmosphere like no other. I'm sure there were 200,000 in the stadium that night. And we touched on this, Mike, in the Robbo podcast, when you said that just felt like there was 3 times as many people in there. It was that loud. Craig McCauley on Facebook said Graham Hogg had Maradona in his pocket, which made up for the own goal at the Camp Nou. Mike Stiles, very famous surname there, United related. Best night at Old Trafford ever. Had a load of mates over and 2 couldn't make it. I had 2 spares outside the ground, tens of thousands outside. Did a bit of genuine fan people watching on the foreground, then sold them at face value. Felt like I got my just reward with atmosphere and performance. Lee Richards sums it up and he says, what's to say that hasn't already been said many times? Steve MacArthur, what a night, and Captain Marvel with his perfect display. John Waldron said, without doubt, the loudest noise I've ever heard when Stapleton knocked in the winner. We were in the old main stand where usually the older fans sit, and even most of them went mad and probably close to heart attacks. That's probably not too far from the truth. So, 23rd minute, Robbo pops up and puts it in the net, 2-1. What's it like on the terraces? Was it game on? We're back in this, or
yeah, because I think it was like you say, very early on as it got to just past 20 minutes. I think Whiteside had hit the bar with a bit of a lob. Shortly before that, maybe directly, that caused the corner. It was a bit like the one that nearly landed on the bar in the cup final in the last minute against City. But he'd lobbed it, it'd gone over the keeper, he's clawed him back, and it just hit the bar and went over. Then Wilkins took a corner. Hogg headed it on.
Hogg got the flick on.
And then it was a diving header. So Robson was great that night. If we say that once, we'll probably say it a couple of dozen times.
That could be the understatement of the year.
But he nodded it on. Robson wasn't even in the picture. Robson came in with a flying diving header. It was horizontal with the ground, if you see the pictures, and he bulleted it into the net. And that just caused an explosion on the terraces. There's only so many words you can use for, that sort of primal scream that comes out when United scored a goal in a vital game. But that set it off, didn't it, Mike, really? Because it was early enough for United.
I was just about to say that the timing was perfect because we started the game really well. They talk about all this modern-day pressing game. The midfield that night was just immense. They did not give Barcelona a second on the ball. Even Butch Wilkins was going flying in with tackles and pressing. But if you start well and then you get to 30, 35, 40 minutes and you don't score, and maybe the atmosphere just drops just a tad, then you go into the second half trying to get 3, and that's a massive uphill task. So you're on top of the game. You can see they're rattled by the noise and the physicality of our midfield. And just at the right time, the pressure built, as you say, Pete, Norman hit the bar, and then we score. They then have start to have doubts. They then change their game plan. And then the crowd just raise. And once you get one, then the belief just gets bigger and bigger, and the noise gets bigger and bigger and just drives everyone forward.
Yeah,
that's the unsung hero is going to be Arlen Muren, though, isn't it? Because I've watched that game over and over, and Arlen Muren doesn't get enough plaudits, does he? But I thought he was brilliant that night, to be fair. I know there's Wilkins and Robson, but Arlen Muren was immense, wasn't he?
Yeah, you're right, Paddy. And not to forget Remy Moses. It was one of his best plays in the United shirt, I think.
Yeah.
And that so he obviously played 4-4-2 then, Atkinson, that night, which at home for United under Atkinson was probably a bit not cautious, but he knew the game would be won or lost in midfield, I guess. But that combination of the hard men of Robson and Moses, and then the skills of Muren and Wilkins, for me, it was the perfect blend of silk and steel.
Yeah,
and that night, it was probably the best performance that midfield put in, I think, because they could battle and they could play. And Robson gets most of the applause, and he should, because it was a superhuman display. But the others, the rest of the team played well. You don't have a night like that when just with one guy doing it. Great midfield.
If you today at a 10 out of 10, the lowest that anyone would get that night would be 8.5 maybe. So everyone was just on their game as an individual and as a team. It's just one of those nights where everybody played well, and then you had one man who was, so immense that it's gone down into folklore, just giving you that extra 1% to drag you over the line.
Yeah,
that was a decent midfield, to be fair, wasn't it?
Oh, it's the best. I tell you what a midfield. What a midfield at all, was it? And that's why I get a lot of complaints, Pete, being the old one in the podcasts I do and stuff, or Paddy going back in the past about midfield. Having a midfield like Moses, Robson, Wilkins, Muren, especially the hard people, because the Roy Kings we talk about, but Robson and Moses, this United was always about a hard man in the midfield who wins that ball. I know we will never replicate that ever again, Pete. This, Mike, but that is it, isn't it? That's that Brian Robson hard man, get stuck in straight in. It's about Man United, isn't it? It's United,
and it's about doing it at certain times as well. You can't just kick lumps out of people because you give away possession, you'll get a yellow card or a red card. But it on that day, that's what was needed. But it wasn't just kick lumps out of them, because I rewatched the game the other night on some Spanish TV thing I found, and they were absolutely awful. Barcelona, they kicked lumps out of us, especially the first half an hour, and we could have so easily risen to that. Especially someone like Remy could have seen red after the fourth or fifth time he got whacked on the ankles, and taken someone out and got a yellow or red card. But it was physicality, but restraint and common sense and footballing brain in a time when the atmosphere could have let them their emotions run away with them and get a yellow or a red card.
Yeah, I think there's going to be some credit there to Big Ron. He was quite had a lot of nous, Big Ron. I don't think necessarily tactically he was a genius, but he knew about people, men, footballers, and I think he would have warned them, look, go in hard, but keep on the right side of the line. I can't remember any bookings, certainly no sendings off that night. But you're right, it was a tough affair, but it was the way those midfielders won the ball and then released, got United going forward quickly. Something we've struggled to do since Fergie left, and certainly under Mourinho and Van Gaal, when it was go forward and then stop at the edge of the penalty area, and a lot of interchanging and passing. And I know the game changes in lots of ways, but if you go at people down the wings like United have done for 60, 70 decades, it puts teams under pressure. It gets the fans lifted, and it feeds on itself, And they did that night, that team, and they had Whiteside up front and Stapleton, two big guys who could look after themselves and lead the line. I think Mark Hughes was substitute that night.
He came on.
Yeah. Of course, he was only just coming into the team, wasn't he? But Atkinson was trying out. He bought Stapleton for a lot of money when Jordan went, and he was testing out, is Whiteside the guy to be up front with him, or is it Mark Hughes? And he rotated it quite a bit.
When I rewatched it the other night, something struck me that I hadn't realised before was, with having Maradona in the side, quite frequently we drop really deep, maybe the halfway line, to pick the ball up. And if you, on that night when he did that, he had Wilkins, Robinson, Moses chipping at his heels. But what also happened was that gave Duxbury and Overston free rein to bomb up and down, because they only had one person up front.
Yeah.
So you had the two centre halves looking after this one lone striker, because Maradona was getting deeper and deeper and more frustrated, going looking for the ball, which left the two wing backs, as they ended up being, just carte blanche to just bomb up and down, because they had no one to mark.
Yeah.
Sorry, Pete, how crucial was it that United didn't concede between Robbo scoring and half time? Do you feel that was when United went in 1-0 at half time? Do you feel that was a turning point of the game, where we kept Barcelona out? We hadn't given a chance to equalise. Had they equalised, could we have seen a different second half?
I think it was critical that all through the match Barcelona didn't score, because with away goals we've got nothing over there. So if they got one back, we'd have to get 4 to win.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a tall order, although we already needed 3. But yes, certainly
Bailey made good save, hadn't he,
a clean sheet. It's good.
Yeah. Well, Bailey had made a good save against Maradona, hadn't he? That shot, was a good shot against Bailey. Bailey had played a great game, hadn't he? Again,
yes. I think he only got forward a couple of times, really, Maradona, as Mike said. But I think one was he appealed for a penalty later on in the game, and he got booked himself, I think, for, should we say, diving.
I think if we'd have conceded before half time, I honestly don't think we would have came back, because the momentum and would have just plateaued, and the crowd would have been a little bit disappointed, and that ever building noise, everybody would have suddenly been flat, and the players would have fed on that, because they fed on the raw emotion and the noise that night. And I think if we'd, especially like 3 or 4 minutes before half time, I think that'd have been game over.
Yeah. It's always a tricky one, Paul, but it's a very good question. But only 7 years before, we'd come back from a Cup Winners' Cup game where we'd lost 4-0 at Porto, and we won the home leg 5-2. It was a lot closer than people thought it would be. But at one stage, I think it got to 3-1 and then 4-1 on the night, and a 4-0 away. And we needed 2 more goals. There's something like 20-odd minutes left at least. So there was all that dynamic going on. If we got the next one to take it to 5-1, but unfortunately they got it to 4-2. And so a single goal like that with away goals counting double can change the whole dynamics. And as Mike said, it can change the crowd. I don't know. I just thank God he didn't score in the first half.
Exactly. So Beating Rhythm Manchester on Twitter says, I was there. But what I do remember is this was one of the first games I videoed off the telly. Watched the highlights over and over. Haven't we all? Mark Lidgett was one of the estimated 10,000 locked out that night, but he made the semi-final. Mark Gilligan, this is a brilliant story. At half-time on the Saturday, before we were beating Forest at home, I stood under Big Ron each home match. He was great chatting with the fans. Due to being away, I didn't get a ticket for Barca. I told Ron, and he said, see me at the Cliff on Monday. And he gave him 2 tickets.
Brilliant.
Brilliant.
I love that.
I hope I pronounced this correct. Murig Wyn Jones on Twitter. The only time I've actually experienced the phrase, you can cut the atmosphere with a knife. Started the game on the Stretford side of the halfway line in the United Road paddock. Ended up in the corner by the Stretty. I've never been there before. And Floyd Arama, this was in response to your tweet, actually, Pete. His dad drove the Barca team coach that night. I want to hear more about that, about what whether he was a United fan and kind of flicking the V's at the Barca guys as he was driving them back, and what the atmosphere was like. I'm Brian, so's my wife on Twitter. I do love some of these Twitter names. Not sure where the belief came from, but the crowd was up for it. Once we got one, it was game on. The ground was rocking. I was in the Stretford end. The noise was deafening all match. Robbo just carried the team, and when Frank scored, mayhem. Also went on the pitch afterwards, best night ever. Sevenoaks George was in the left-hand stretchy end as a 13-year-old at the time, best night of his life, and it still is. 39 years later, it's still the best night of his life. Mark Fletcher, he was in the K stand with his mum and granddad, which was one of the last games that his granddad ever attended. Constant chants and singing all game. Delirium at 3-0. Barca could not cope with United's high tempos, the greatest game. Now, you touched on that earlier on, Pete, about the football that Matt Busby played with his teams as well, and that replicated that night of what United are known for, the exciting, attacking, what they call cavalier-style football.
Well, swashbuckling football, I call it swashbuckling.
Swashbuckling, that's
daring do.
That's it.
So Ottoman 62 was on holiday in Marbella. The game was live on the TV, which was unusual in those days. Hotel was quite posh. But as the game progressed, more and more Brit holidaymakers started watching until the hotel bar was packed. At the end, we were going mental and waiters were in tears. Brilliant. Steve Hartley says, went there as a 16-year-old in Stretty because he'd collected enough tokens. Mental scenes he'll never forget. My mum was so worried after listening to the second half on the radio at home, she jumped in her car to pick me up on the Warwick Road. It's the only time she ever did that. And Victor Grady says, got Maradona's autograph at the airport whilst working airside just after he got off the plane. and was at the match with my son and a friend. And as they say, oh, what a night. And finally, Mark Weaver says tickets were changing hands for more than £80 in 1984. 80 quid. What's the equivalent of that today? 200 quid today? Maybe 300 quid. £80 in 1984. And they were still thousands outside when the game kicked off. The touts couldn't believe their luck on the night. I'd gone down with 5 reds and only one got a ticket. I think a paddock ticket was around £8 at the time. And Steve Hennessy says Maradona dribbling past 3 players and falling over the ball. So United going at half-time, 1 goal to the good. The 50th minute, I think, if I'm memory serves me, Ray Wilkins has a shot from the edge of the box. Urruti makes an absolute dog's dinner of it, and Robbo, quick as a flash, onto it, puts it in, 2-2 on aggregate, 2-0 on the night. Was that the moment that we knew that there was only going to be one winner in this?
Yes, I think so. I think that second goal. And if you watched maybe 30 seconds or 45 seconds before the goal, is a perfect example of what I was explaining about earlier about the pressing, because they're right back at the ball, played it. Schuster played it. Wilkins was charging in. Moses was charging in, and they were trying to play out, and they got hemmed in. And then Schuster put an awful pass across his own box. And once again, there was a United player right on the defender. And then Whiteside tackles the keeper, and Moses is suddenly there, right wing somehow. So it was just a perfect example of how they harried and hounded Barcelona for the whole night.
Is that goal, by the way? Have you seen that repeat of that? Robson's nowhere near that ball. How he makes up ground to get round.
He just appeared out of nowhere.
The angle. Yeah, he's sneaking in like Lester Piggott used to do on the stand side on the derby, and he just come round and just I mean, whoa, beautiful. Just that's what just wonderful.
That's Lester Piggott in the racing derby, not a derby match.
Derby County, yeah.
Anybody looking through the books now? I don't remember Piggott playing for us.
Come down side. I'm saying he come around the side. You never see him. That was all about.
No, you're spot on. He came from nowhere. He's remembered for his battling qualities, like Keane and Robson. Very difficult to put a piece of paper between them in terms of picking the better one. Both brilliant captains, both brilliant leaders. You'd have them in the trenches with you, whatever the battle was. And thank God we had those 2 players playing during the 80s and the 90s. But the way he took that second goal, Robson, as Paddy said, he came from nowhere. It was very much like Dennis Law with his instincts, where the goalie, if any goalie spilt the ball, Law was there, came out of thin air, and he was there, and invariably put the ball in the net. And Robson did that for the second goal. Like I said, with the first one, the diving header, he wasn't in the picture when he set off. When he launched, it was just incredible. He always threw his body at it, foot or shoulders or whatever, which unfortunately did result in some of the injuries that he got at crucial times. But fearless, absolutely fearless, would give all for the cause. I think what was another thing that was crucial, Paul, in that is that was 6 minutes into the second half, and it was. I don't know who won the toss at the start of the game, but the fact that United were playing towards the Stretford end in the second half made a significant difference. We might have won playing towards the scoreboard end because the support on all 4 sides was superb. But at the Stretford end, like I say, 12,000 bodies and those in the seats right at the back, you could suck the ball in sometimes on a European night at Old Trafford. And it was just a cacophony of noise, not just when the goal went in, but the lead up to it. And I think not only did we think, God, we can do this, but the Barcelona players thought, bloody hell, we are up against it now. We've got a mountain to climb. How do we stop this? It must have been like when the Zulus came over the hill at the Boer War or Rorke's Drift or whatever it was.
And 3 minutes later, Frank Stapleton pops up and smashes one in the back of the net. Pure carnage. Watching the footage back in the million times I'm sure we all have, just to relive it all over again. I can't. I mean, I wasn't there. I cannot imagine how loud that was in the ground. Not just that, obviously the whole game, but that was, if there was a cherry on a cake, it was United. I mean, Barcelona had gone by this point, hadn't they? You knew that we were going to keep going and swarming on them like, hunting animals. And then say Staples pops up, bangs it in. Euphoria is only looking at the footage. That's the only way I can describe it. Mike and Pete, you'll have Paddy, you'll have much better views on that than I will.
If you go back to the start of the move, I can remember because I was in A stand at the time because I was 12 and I went with. We got allocated the tickets from United, so we had to go where the tickets came from. So we were in A stand. So I was right in line with when Butch Wilkins is swinging his arm around, telling Duxbury to go. And it's already pandemonium, so we've only just scored. And the ball breaks to the Robbo. And what often gets overlooked is an amazing pass on his left, outside of his left boot. Arthur Olsen's booming up the left-hand side. And my favourite part of the whole night is not the goal. It's the noise when the ball is in the air from Arthur's cross. It's just this wall of noise as it's landing on Norman's head. And then obviously Frank bangs it in and everyone goes wild. But that 2 seconds that the ball leaves Arthur's boots to get on Norman's head, it is like Pete said, everyone's sucking the ball in, or just their energy and their passion is coming out, ready for this moment of bliss when Frank scores.
There's got to be Albiston's. I mean, Arthur Albiston, bless him. What a great left back, though, isn't he? And the cross deep, and it's a centre forward's dream to have that up in the air, isn't it, and knock it back down. For someone like Frank. So it's again set up by Captain Marvel, wasn't it? The whole move, but it's a great cross by Albiston. I so admire Albiston. What a great left foot. I love left-footed players. Gordon Hill, but Albiston quality. Oh yeah.
And it was it was a superb cross, you're right. And what Whiteside did well to get up and knock it back. But then when you've got the third goal from 2-0 down, Stapleton, he just volleys it in. He volleys it in. Yeah. We all love volleys. Don't we all love volleys? Who doesn't love a volley? Yeah. But a volley right in front of the Stretford end to put you 3-2 up against Barcelona in a knockout competition. It's the stuff you would have prayed for. And the players went crazy. They all piled in. They're jumping on each other. The fans, it's always hard. There are some goals you can't celebrate enough. You can't. I don't mean for long enough. You just can't. Other than that kind of primal scream that I mentioned earlier, and people were screaming and wide-eyed and falling about all over the place on the Stretford end. It was a mixture of disbelief and euphoria. And it's, if you could put that in a bottle and drink it every now and again, it'd be we won't need the national health.
Yeah, I struggle to convey to people how noisy it was and how emotional it was and how much of a crescendo it was that night. Because you can, and this is going to sound really cliche, but you had to be there to fully appreciate the noise. And it's really, really difficult for me to explain to anyone else. Just the stand was vibrating. The stand literally was vibrating. At one point, maybe 10 minutes to go, I looked at my dad and was like, is this stand going to break? Because it was just vibrating, bouncing the whole ground. You could feel it under your feet. The concrete was giving, was swaying. It was just incredible.
I think you're spot on again. I mean, we could be all making this up or exaggerating, but just the memories, the variety, Paul, and the number of memories you just read out earlier, it triggers off in people. This was 40 years ago. I guess some of the people that tweeted in probably can't remember what they had for breakfast this morning, because I can't. But you can remember those nights like they were yesterday, and it's because of the impact it had on you. You can't make it up. You can't make up Barcelona 99 against Bayern, or Owen's last-minute winner against City, or lots of others we've had. But that night, there was something. And if you talk to people who've watched United since the 50s, there's probably about 5 games where they say the atmosphere went to another level. And one of them was coming back from Bilbao, I believe, at Main Road in 57. Another was when we came back from Tottenham in the Cup Winners' Cup in 63 from 2-0 down to 4-1. And then there's been a few others since. People sometimes say the Barca semi-final in 08. But there's a handful of games where it did go to 11 on the volume number. And it did at that moment when Stapleton scored. And we all ended up a little bit away from where we started when that move began.
I think the only, as I said on the Robbo podcast, Paul, that the only noise I'd heard before that was when Stapleton scored the winner against Everton in the 83 quarter final, but last minute volley. That was one hell of a noise. But it still paled in comparison to.
It was a very similar volley. It was a very similar volley, actually, wasn't it?
Yeah,
right foot.
Yeah, that was
diagonal
back
across
that
the
was
goal.
some noise when it nestled in the top corner. That was limbs, as they say.
Yeah, I mean, when I've had the pleasure of talking with Norman Whiteside and Robbo about the atmosphere they most remember and the loudest, without a hesitation, they go, the 1984, the Barcelona at home. Never heard anything like it before. They said, and we played in some incredible atmospheres at Old Trafford. But that, as you quite just said, Pete, it just took it up a notch. And, they just said it was just an unbelievable feeling to, and they said that's what pushed us on. That is what drove the team on. It wasn't the fact that it's Barcelona. I said it could have been anybody, but the fact that the crowd was so vocal and so loud that night, and they swore blind that Old Trafford actually moved. It was just that. Say it was bouncing, it was swaying, people were just doing, and they said it was just that's more than anything else. The 11th man, which has been said throughout United's history, is that the 11th man. We're the fans of the 11th man.
How important is the crowd though in any game that you just said?
Oh, incredible!
About the crowd is the 11th or the 12th man, 11th man. They are so important at Old Trafford and big European nights. And like you say,
there wasn't a lull. There wasn't a lull through the game where it went quieter for 3 or 4 minutes. It was just constant. And especially after the third goal, from the third goal to the final whistle, it was just unreal.
I think we've got to give Graham Hogg a lot of credit as well, and he goes under the radar quite a lot. I think when it comes to talking about those United teams of the 80s, some of the players absolutely get the credit they deserve, but Graham Hogg that night was given the job of marking Maradona, and it's a cliche, and I'm going to say it. The rumor is that he's still in his pocket somewhere, but I mean, what an incredible performance when you're up against a Diego Maradona, and you quietly go about your business. He wasn't one of these players that drew the press or got lots and lots of attention because of who he was. But what an incredible performance that night to silence and to basically keep him very, very quiet. I mean, there aren't a lot of centre halves that could do that against Maradona, and he went on and did that. So I think he deserves an awful lot of credit for that performance that night.
But Paul, and then Pete will come with me there. I mean, we've had Jim Holton and Gordon McQueen just talked about the very start of the podcast. How good have all those Scottish centre half been for all of us?
Yeah,
but Graham Hogg is again an unsung hero that night. A tall Scot, brilliant, again an unsung. So yeah, well.
And he must be
sorry, Paul.
Go on.
Well, I think he'd come in because Paul McGrath was injured. He'd had operation on his knees. So we had Paul McGrath as a centre-back at the club then. Gordon McQueen was still there, Kevin Moran. So he had some competition to elbow his way in. And it was a bit ungainly, Graham Hogg, but he was dogged, determined, and that night was, I'd say, as far as I remember, that his best display in a United shirt. Yeah,
and he showed some balls because he conceded an own goal in the first leg. So
I was going to say, he scored an own goal, hadn't he?
It was a cracking own goal. Don't get me wrong; it was probably the best goal he's ever scored. But to score an own goal, that must have been in the back of his mind a little bit at the start of the game. So to produce his best performance in the return leg when he'd scored an own goal is that takes some balls.
Oh yeah. Against one of Europe's top clubs. These two ties, these two legs, United's first matches against Barcelona. I think. I don't think we'd met before.
I think you're right.
So it was a big thing to play Barcelona. In the early years of European football, from the mid-50s onwards, Barca, I think Barca played in about 13 or 14 finals. They didn't win many, but up to that point, they were well experienced in Europe. Might not be in double figures, it might be 8. I'll have to check that. But so they were the most experienced team in Europe in playing in European competitions in 84. So for us to have gone 2-0 down and then come back the way we did, there was that disbelief amongst the crowd. We knew that coming back against them was an Everest, and that the world was watching, and we're always proud of our team. But when they do something monumental, which they did that night, every man, child, woman, dog in the ground was giving it their all, and they still do it to this day, But there you had a lot of the terraces, so you had that. It probably made for a louder cacophony and a lower roof, of course. Without getting too technical, the roofs are so high now, you do lose some of it. But I still think Old Trafford on its day, even now, is still very, very special. And don't believe everything you read on Twitter about the roof caving in and blah blah blah. It's still
don't believe anything you read on Twitter, Pete.
Again,
that's the lesson. Just don't believe anything you read on Twitter. That's the secret.
Especially if I've written it.
But full time, United win 3-0. The crowd comes onto the pitch. Robbo gets lifted into the air. Was that just all that pent up emotion and the anticipation? Like we're almost there. The full whistle goes. Robbo can't get off quick enough because they've trapped him, and he's carried off. How many times can you ever recall another time where a Manchester United player has been mobbed by the crowd, lifted onto the shoulders, and taken off, and just it's like a trophy. It's like the fans had their own trophy, and he was their European Cup. Just incredible scenes. And
apart from 74 against City, United fans going on the pitch was unheard of. And it wasn't just a few, was it? As you say, Paul, it was the day itself, the build up, the tension, the excitement, witnessing the greatest night at Old Trafford in my eyes that's ever been. People do strange things, don't they? Their emotions get the better of them, and they just want to go and grab this godlike figure and try and celebrate with him.
It's quite. I watched it the other night again on YouTube again. It's quite emotional actually. What's going on now? Quite emotional. I felt quite emotional watching it. The care of that, because it really is quite an emotive moment.
Even 39 years later, Paddy. It's not something that happened last week or a couple of months ago. This was 39 years ago when when a lot of us were in our. 84. I was 12, so we're in our teens at that point. It's obviously people weren't. He was much younger. He had given his all, Robson, and it did look like he needed a lift off the pitch. I think that's not why the fans did it, but he'd left. They often say, don't they? He left nothing on that pitch, and Robson didn't that night. He was everywhere. But it certainly wasn't hooliganism that night. No.
We did get a warning off UEFA, I think, and the Juventus tie in the next round. They said, please don't go on the pitch. It was just pure elation, human emotion, something very, very special had happened, and that one man was at the pinnacle of that, and the only other time I can recall it was Beckham in that semi-final at Villa Park in '99, which was another tremendous game that had everything. Do you remember Giggs' goal and sending off penalties, last-minute penalty missed, and I think they carried Beckham off. And that was very reminiscent of of Robbo.
Well, they did this, well. We did the same at Main Road in '85.
Oh yes, of course.
He got carried off yet again.
Yes,
as we talked about the other week, Paul. An amazing performance and scoring great goals at great and important times. So yeah, and also going back to the Barcelona game, you know, you remember around the time there was talk of him going to Juventus and leaving United. So you know, everyone was worried stiff that Robbo would leave. So maybe there was some subliminal thing there to go and show him how much he meant to us to try and get him to stay. Maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's easy to forget what a team effort that was as well. You know, Robbo was obviously the captain at the helm, driving that ship. But what a phenomenal performance by United as a collective for that 90 minutes. You know, and I think that obviously never be forgotten in as long as us older chaps are around. Put it into so trying to put this in context for those maybe listening to this or watching this in the follow up that only heard stories from their fathers or their mothers or their grandparents. Could you sum that night up for them in a nutshell? Difficult and almost impossible to answer that. But they said, "What was it really like?" from someone else, and you go, "Right, this is what it was like."
Yeah, for me, there's two things. First, going back on the coach to North Devon, there was a almost stony silence from the minute everybody got on the bus. The minute I got home to Biddyford at 3:30 on the Thursday morning, and yes, we were tired, but there was just silence from virtually everybody on the way home. It was just like you were struggling to comprehend what you just witnessed, and it is also you'd be looking at your mates as did we just see that? You know, sort of the disbelief that always sticks in my mind, and also for me personally, I can go to my grave quite happily knowing I was there that night. And that's the biggest thing I can say about it. You know, I was there. I witnessed it. I can die a happy man.
Pete?
Yeah, I'll die a happy man next to Mike. It epitomised everything that is the spirit of Manchester United on and off the pitch. And it's probably one of, if you didn't see it, or even if you did see it and you wanted to revisit, if somebody said, what match did you miss, or what match could you go back to? That would have to be in one of the top 5, I think, for maybe since the Babes. I didn't see the Babes, but probably since the mid-50s. If you had to pick 5 top home matches that had everything, I think the Barcelona 84 one did. And the fact, as I said earlier, Paul, that so many people remember this on a Monday night in June. You know, so many memories. It was extra special, but it captured what Manchester United are all about.
And Paddy?
I think I wasn't there to soak up the atmosphere, but I think watching it on the TV, it's different, isn't it? It's totally different, but you're still following the excitement of it all. But I had the New Balance boots on anyway, so I felt I was part of the match. So they were my black New Balance boots with my Hero Robson. So I just think you couldn't. It was just horrendous. It was great. I was only myself, my sister, my parents, Irish, all of them, bless them. My dad, I don't think my dad watched the game, so it was just me. Always was, wasn't it? As a lone lad watching football, but best ever excitement ever again. A moment that you'll always remember. Him and wearing New Balance boots in the living room.
Oh, of course. Be rude not to, right? Before we wrap this up, chaps, and again, I'm saying, Mike, we could go and talk about this for hours.
Yeah.
I want to give Mick has sent me a message, and he's just with 9 points that he recollects from that match. So number 1, 3 goals, obviously. Number 2, Maradona being kept relatively quiet. Number 3, Robson driving United forward throughout the game. I'm sure it was his leadership that was the deciding factor on us qualifying for the next round. 100%. Yeah. Number 4, how few Barcelona fans were there. I'm guessing only a few hundred. And you pointed this out earlier on, Mike, how just a sea of red. Very few Barcelona fans. Number 5, after Stapleton got the third goal, there was over 30 minutes still left to play. It felt like 30 hours.
Yeah.
Number 6, the roof nearly lifting off of Old Trafford when Stapleton got his winner. Number 7, the best atmosphere he's ever witnessed at Old Trafford. Number 8, staying behind T. Robson being carried off the pitch by adoring fans. Number 9, the sheer joy at the final whistle, and also felt like my eardrums had burst when he returned home. When he returned home to Bradford, his then girlfriend had recorded the match, and he sat and watched it all over again.
Brilliant.
So, listen, and I say every single podcast. Well, we could talk about this for the rest of the night, but Mike, top 3 European games at Old Trafford in your supporting history?
Yeah, that was number 1. Number 2 would be the Juventus. Sorry, even though it was totally different atmosphere, it was a semi-final of the European competition, and I think if we'd have been drawn away the first leg, we'd have maybe gone through. We didn't have Robson that night, or for both legs, so that made a massive difference. And Barca in 2008, 4 Scholes go.
Pete, you're a little bit more travelled than the other 3 of us here, and I don't mean that with all respect. I don't mean that rudely.
You mean I'm older?
I didn't want to say it like that. I just was trying to be diplomatic about it, Pete.
History.
I'm always happy just to be here and be insulted. Well, I was lucky enough as a 13-year-old. I don't know if I'd reached 13 then. Yes, I was 13 to be at the Real Madrid semi-final at home in '68, which was tremendous. I wish I'd have been at the away game, but I was only 13. So the Real Madrid one at home, that was something very special. 1-0 we won. Georgie Best got us a slender lead. Again, the crowd magnificent that night. And we were playing Real Madrid, which then as a boy growing up in the late 50s, early 60s, they dominated world football. They were a magical, mystical side. And so that's one. The Barcelona one we just talked about is going to be in there, Otherwise, we've overcooked it. And finally, I'll just go a bit left field with Porto at home in '97, when we got revenge for anyone that sat through them beating us in 77, 20 years before. But if you remember, David May, I think, started the scoring that night, and it was just a tremendous. I think it was the first leg at home, '97, and we won 4-0. And again, Porto was something special then. Fergie's United were just learning how to play in Europe then, and that was a very special night. So those 3.
Okay.
Wasn't Mourinho? That wasn't Mourinho running down the line, was it?
No, that was 2004. So we've done Porto, 77, 97, 2004, and maybe other games. No, that was a little bit later. I'm sure 2004 when Porto went on to win it. Did they?
Yeah. Fergie Mourinho had a fallout that night. I know that. It was disrespectful. I remember.
Yeah, it was. But you could have imagined Fergie doing it in his younger day.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely. And Paddy, would that night, 1984, be in your top United?
Yeah, definitely. But definitely the biggest one. But I said being at Old Trafford, I think the Paul Scholes one Mike mentioned. But the other one is we played Barcelona and it was 3-3. Now this might be Pete, Mike, and yourself, Paul, if you can remember. I think it was the 1990s or 98. It's when Rivaldo scored an overhead kick.
Yeah,
94.
Remember?
Was that 94?
Was it 94?
94, yes. Yeah.
94, 95. I think.
I was there that night, and I've never seen anything like. I mean, York and Cole were up front for us.
Oh no, 98. Is that when it was 3 or home and away?
Yeah, and Rivaldo scored incredible goals for Barcelona against us at home.
Yeah, that was 90.
Yeah, they've been 98, 99 because we drew 3-3 out there. Yeah,
it was an incredible atmosphere at Old Trafford. That incredible. So and that one not on Paul. And
was it 3 all home and away?
I think it was. Rivaldo scored for Barcelona overhead kick at Old Trafford. And Beckham scored a free kick. Again, brilliant free kick, I remember.
That doesn't narrow it down, Paddy. Beckham scoring a free kick. But quite cool.
Great night to be there. Yeah, it was a great
fantastic.
night to be there.
Gents, it's been an absolute pleasure having you all on this evening. So if you want to follow the chaps on Twitter, Mike, yours is wrong. It's 80s.
I've misspelled it.
You have. It's 80s Culture Fan. You can follow Pete on Twitter at Pete Molyneux. And if JFK is your bag, then you need to be following Paddy on Twitter, which is at JFKKpod. I love a bit of JFK.
Me too.
Yeah.
Sport
I
is
Go on, Paddy, give it a plug. Give it a plug.
Yeah. From the age of 16, following Kennedy story, that's everywhere. High on the sport, mate. Robert Kennedy. Yeah. It's a big story, mate. I'd love to tell you all at some point about my story, and Fergie especially being part of it as well. It's great.
Name drop.
So
that's another podcast, Paul.
No, it is a completely different. But if you're interested in anything JFK related, and let's be honest, who isn't? It's a fascinating case of who did it and all that kind of stuff. But gents, it's been an absolute honour and a pleasure having you all on tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pete.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Pete. Thank you, Paddy. Lovely to see you all.
Thank you very much.
And so this has been the United Before Fergie podcast, talking about the 1984 European Cup Winners' Cup Quarter Final, United 3, Barcelona 0. If you are watching this or watching this on the follow-up, hello, you've missed the last hour and 11 minutes, but you've got an hour and 11 minutes of absolute treacle to get through. And if you're listening to this on the audio podcast, please like, subscribe, etc., on whatever platform. And we'll see you again very soon for another United Before Fergie podcast. Until such time, take care of yourselves, everyone, and good night.
Cheers, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, guys.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Brilliant, Pete. Lovely to meet you. And thanks, Mike. I know you're all the way down in Devon. It's a pleasure. Thank you very much.
And right back at you, Paddy. Yes, and lovely. Really enjoyed it. Who doesn't enjoy talking about United?